afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the last session of the second day. My name is Matthew Izatt. I'm a product manager on the Gmail team. What I'd like to do for the next little while is talk about Gmail, talk about what we've done, what we're doing, and what's coming up, and especially focus on giving you some insights into how we think and why we are building the things that we are. We also intended to have a roundtable. As you can see, thanks to y'all, we didn't have room for the table. So we will instead have a Q&A session. We have a number of PMs, product managers here from the Gmail team, and we will have time for questions at the end. So please contemplate anything you always want to ask of the Gmail team. It's as much as I like speaking to you, we really like to hear from you as well. Now, as you heard in the keynote both yesterday from Prabhakar and from Garrick today, the G Suite team and really the Gmail team are focused on three primary areas: security, smarts or intelligence, and simplicity, or on the Gmail team I like to think of this as more productivity. And we'd like to frame all of what we're working on around these three areas. So hopefully that gives you an idea of where we're mentally focusing our focus on, and where we're deciding not to spend our time on. Now, the first area I want to talk about is confidential mode. You've probably heard about this quite a bit. It's been mentioned in the press a fair amount. It was touched on in the keynote this morning. I'd like to touch on a little bit more about what confidential mode is and why you might be interested in it. Now, the functionality of it is pretty straightforward. Confidential mode allows you to send an email and prevent the recipient from forwarding it, copying and pasting from it, downloading, and potentially allows you to expire that message as well. Now, confidential mode is not intended to provide 100% bulletproof security. The name is great, but people hear confidential mode and they think this is somehow a bulletproof security mechanism. Obviously, if you send this to somebody, they could take out their phone, take a picture of it, and then do whatever they want with it. There are other ways for a sufficiently motivated attacker to get access to the content. But let me give you an example, or a couple examples, of why confidential mode is interesting and what we do intend it for. The first one is what I'll call the accidental leakage case. Or the semi-intentional leakage case. You send a message to your team, your company, you write at the top of the message, "This is confidential, please don't forward it." Somebody receives it, and they think, well, you know, this person wasn't part of the recipient list, but I can probably send it to them, that must be okay. They wouldn't have sent this to a large group of recipients, it really was confidential. Or there's the not so motivated, but if it's easy, I'm gonna leak this to my friends type person. So confidential mode is meant to prevent that type of leakage from happening. Now, a second one is what I'll call counterparty risk. Imagine that you are sending confidential information to a third party, maybe an accounting firm, an auditing firm, and you trust them, right? They do a pretty good job. They're not going to leak your information. But what's going to happen after you send it to them is that, as you heard, in legacy systems you have to delete your mail. But now you don't delete your mail anymore. It just sits there pretty much forever. So 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, your information is still sitting there inside their systems. And whether they get acquired by somebody, whether they then are hacked, you are subject to whatever information security risks that counterparty had. By expiring your content, you can ensure that after the counterparty has received that content and used it, they won't be keeping it forever. Now again, it's not a perfect system. They could extract that information, put it somewhere else beyond your reach. But it is intended to limit the potential risk factors there. Now, another area of security that we focused on, and again, Garrick touched on this this morning, is security warnings with a security redesign in Gmail Desktop Web and something similar happening on mobile. Traditionally, we've had warnings, but they were perhaps a little bit technical and a little bit small, and we found that users, although they mostly understood them, sometimes had a tendency to downplay how important these warnings were. So we've decided to essentially make these warnings completely in your face. They are large, they are red, and it is very, very hard for an average user to accidentally say, well, I missed it, I didn't really think this was all that important. We've also taken steps to make sure we've differentiated between very serious warnings, potentially malicious attacks, from more informational warnings. So for example, if you go into your spam folder and a message is dangerous, it will have a much different warning than if you go into your spam folder and it's merely an attempt to get you to buy Viagra, for example. Now, one of the things that we work on that probably doesn't get as much press coverage and as much identification is a lot of the work against phishing. And I want to highlight a couple examples of things that we've done here that you might not be totally aware of. Now, one of the more recent attempts at phishing is try to send an email and make it look like it came from somebody important at your company. So you might imagine that I receive an email, and it says from Sundar, and he's asking me for something that is confidential, but Sundar should have access to confidential information, so why wouldn't I send it to him? We have taken steps to ensure that if somebody attempts to impersonate by using the name or the identity of a person in your company, that we will flag that message. And perhaps if they choose to attempt to spoof the detection by using Unicode characters, there's many characters that look like an O or many characters that can look like an L, we will attempt to detect that as well. And again, attempt to block that. Another example is URL shorteners. So we've all received URLs, so links which are from Bitly or other examples, and you don't see exactly where they're going. And for a while, you basically clicked on them, and you kind of hope they went to the right place, or at least a safe place, I shouldn't say the right place. Our systems will now not only look at the first level of links, but we will actually follow through any redirects and ensure that wherever that content is going is a safe link, so it's not a known phishing site, for example. Between all the work that we've done, we believe that we are around 99.9% or more than 99.9% now of stopping business email compromise scenarios, which we think is a big step forward. But the team, as we all know, the team will not rest because the attackers will not rest in their attempts to work around the defenses that we have. Now, moving on to intelligence. You've all heard about AI and how Google is focused heavily on AI. The Gmail team as well is heavily focused on adding intelligence to the product in order to make sure that you can focus more on your work and less on having to manage mail. Now, the first one I want to talk about is the feature that we have called nudging. Nudging works two ways. We have an inbound and an outbound method. So, for example, if you receive an email from your boss asking you to complete a presentation on Tuesday, and you received it last week, a few days later you forgot to respond, forgot to act on it, we will nudge you. We will bring that message back up to the top and suggest that you have not acted upon this. You might actually be interested in acting on this. Similarly for outbound messages. So you send an email to a peer, you say, hey, I'm working this project, can you please review this by next Thursday? And it turns out that if you're really organized, you'd keep a task list, remember that you asked that person for something. If you're like most of us, you probably just hope to remember and hope they get back to you. And if they don't get back to you, you don't remember, then you'll get to next Thursday and realize, oh, actually, I forgot to follow up on that. So with nudging, we will attempt to notify you of that outbound failure to get a response as well. Now, nudging is an interesting feature, like much of the artificial intelligence features that we work on, in that there's no guarantee you'll ever actually see it. If you are a person, and I guarantee you some of you are like this, who takes good care of their email, you respond to everything on time, you follow up to everything, the odds are pretty good you will never actually see a nudge because you've taken care of everything. On the other hand, there's a set of you who are more what we kind of call messy inboxers. You process your mail, but some things just happen to fall off the edge, and you hope that you remember, you hope somebody else follows up with you. You are exactly the type of user for whom this feature will be helpful. Now, you're probably all familiar with Smart Reply. You may be less familiar with Smart Compose, although we've highlighted this at the keynote recently. So Smart Compose is currently launched to Trusted Tester for Enterprise and is launched in an experimental mode, so a limited opt-in mode for consumers. And Smart Compose allows you to complete, or offers to complete, not only words, but sentences for you and ideas for you. It also understands information. So for example, if you are filling in your address quite frequently, it will attempt to determine the places in which you are planning to fill in your address and offer to autocomplete it for you. Now, this is a great example of a machine learning or an AI feature where we have to be relatively careful in how we roll it out and really careful in making sure that it is ready for a business audience before it's fully made available to everyone. So that's the reason why it's in a limited mode right now, and Garrick this morning announced that it would come to full production in the coming weeks. So to give you an example of the type of thing we want to be careful of, this is trained on a lot of data that people write, essentially stuff that Google, or content that Google knows about and can run a machine learning system across. And so you can imagine that a lot of people write sentences about Google. They say Google is something. So you can imagine that you start writing a sentence saying Google is, and the options the system, if it were simply going based on a pure machine learning system with no human input, would offer is potentially things that say good things about Google and potentially things that say bad things about Google. We want to make sure that for your companies, this does not happen. We want to make sure there is no scenario in which your company is referred to in a negative light. There's other similar types of issues that can occur with this type of system. So this is why we are taking the time to tune the system to ensure that there is a combination of just raw machine learning as well as human intelligence applied through algorithms to make sure that the system is safe and ready for everyone. And so that's what we believe will be ready in the coming weeks. If you haven't had a chance to try out Smart Compose, you can go to your personal Gmail, look in settings for a flag called experimental, and you can enable this and try it out. It's actually quite magical. Another intelligence feature we're working on is something we call high priority notifications. So if you're like me, and I know a number of you are, you receive a lot of email. And traditionally, we allowed you to turn notifications off so you don't get bothered, or leave notifications on, in which case every single message to your inbox you get a notification about. And if you're like me, you're in the middle of a presentation, and you get buzzed. Actually, sorry, there's one now. Actually, it just turns out it's actually just the team meeting notes. But of course, they send it to me, and so I get a notification, I get buzzed, and I don't know if it's the team meeting notes, or if it turns out it's an urgent request from my boss to work on a presentation that he's doing immediately following this one. And so I, of course, check my notification. And then it takes me a while to get back into the flow, although I seem to have done a decent job right here. With high priority notifications, what we are doing is offering to the user to allow them to let the system decide what it thinks is important. And it will only notify you, it will only buzz your device for very important notifications. So very important in this case, to give you a sort of a percentage concept, we found that we've been able to reduce the number of notifications sent by about 90%, and still have users feel like they are getting the most important notifications buzzed to their device, so to their phone, to their watch, to whatever device is notifying them. So in that sense, this feeds into the digital well-being initiative that Google and G Suite have to make sure that you are more in control of your life. The digital devices aren't running your lives, but rather they are helping you accomplish your work. Now moving on to simplicity. We realize that for all the whiz-bang features that we can build on Gmail, fundamentally you care about some of, well, the fundamentals. You care about how Gmail works, you care about it being simple to use, you care about your users being able to open it up, get their job done, and get on with their day. Now I'm sure you've all noticed one of the things we've added recently is what we call the side panel. So once upon a time, we had a calendar lab. It was stuck in a small corner of the screen. It enabled you to see some very basic calendaring functionality. We've now given you the ability to see calendar side by side with your mail. It is a view that we're going to continue improving upon. So, for example, it currently has a limited set of views, but we will be expanding upon that as we go forward. And you can expect this to become a very rich surface for interacting with mail and calendar at the same time. Now, if I switch over to tasks as an example, you can drag and drop an email over into the side panel and convert it into a task. We are trying to make sure this is not simply two views sitting on your screen at the same time. Multi-windowing is, of course, a solution for that as well, but make sure it feels like, or it acts like, a single suite of products meant to work together. So you can drag and drop an email over into your tasks pane, and as you see the example here, that task will then link back to the message so that you can see what the task was in reference to. Now, one of the most common requests we had was to improve offline functionality within Gmail. Until recently, we had a standalone Chrome app for enabling offline functionality. And we heard loud and clear from our customers that although this delivered offline functionality, the fact that it was a separate app, had a different UI, was something that was not really all that familiar with their users, or your users, was something that people had to remember to go ahead and install, and it was simply a little bit clunky in that sense. We heard that loud and clear, and we're proud to say that Gmail Desktop Web is now fully offline capable. All you have to do is go into settings, turn on offline, and it will seamlessly work online, offline, in a bad network. In addition to being built in, this is admin controllable. So an admin can decide whether a user is allowed to allowed to enable offline. The admin can determine whether on logout, whether the data is removed from the machine or remains on the machine for caching purposes. So we built significant admin controls over this as well. And so we'll continue to work on offline for the next while to continue to improve it based on your feedback. But based on what we've heard so far, we think we've made a significant improvement to offline from what existed previously. Snooze is a feature that we brought over from Inbox. It enables you, if you receive a message and the time you want to act upon that message is later, whether that later be tomorrow or next week, to remove that message from your inbox and have an assurance that it will come back to you at the right time when you want to take an action upon it. Now, one of the pieces of feedback we have heard often from our customers is that search is not as easy to use as it could be. And it's interesting because Google is a search company and Gmail search is actually very powerful. But in order to use it, you have to know certain things about the information that you are looking for. Or you have to understand how to use advanced search in Gmail. So the capabilities were all there. But there are many users who found it more difficult than it should be to search for content within Gmail. So we are working on an effort to simplify the search interface and the way in which you interact. And that's through two different ways. The first is by surfacing the advanced search options. So making clear to users that if they do a search for a piece of text, that there are other ways in which they can filter out their options. So traditionally, you had to look through a relatively small drop-down menu, which was located on the search bar. We're now going to put that very upfront for users. So they don't have to recognize that search menu is there, nor do they have to go through extra clicks to find it and parse all the different fields that are in there. Now, the other thing that we want to do is make search smarter. So suppose I am searching for Project Skylight. Now, the system actually knows that Project Skylight has a certain number of recipients here. And so it is offering that Tim and John are two possible or reasonably likely filters that I might want to apply to this search. Similarly, for PDFs, text documents, the system will intelligently determine what the more likely filtering options are and present those to you. So rather than just presenting a list of all the possible search options, we will provide smarter choices so that your users can more quickly get to the answers they're looking for. Now, obviously, the biggest update recently has been to Gmail Desktop Web, but we do intend to make a similar, albeit somewhat smaller, update to mobile. So we intend to give it a updated look to make it match the latest Google material design standards and make it match the look and feel of desktop web. Similar to desktop web, we will bring the ability to access attachments directly from your inbox. So bring attachments one click closer, as well as giving you options for density. We know that there are a number of different audiences amongst Gmail users. There's the set who wishes to see as many messages as possible on one screen. They would like us to cram as much as possible on one screen so that they can see 50 or 100 messages at a glance. And obviously on mobile, we're not going to get to 50 or 100, but you can still imagine that we could produce a lot of messages on one screen on mobile. On the other side, there's a set of users who want to see as much information about each message on screen. They'd rather scroll, they don't mind scrolling, but they'd like to see as much content as possible on the main inbox so they can decide whether to open something or delete it without even going into the message. And finally, there's obviously a group in the middle who want to see a reasonable balance of those two. And so on Gmail Desktop Web, we have 3 density options, which are meant to address those 3 audiences, and we will bring a very similar set of options to mobile. Now, Gmail and Conversation View are essentially synonymous. I see one person very excited about this, probably more than just one person. We do truly believe that Conversation View is probably the right answer for most users. Having said that, we have heard loud and clear that there is a set of users who are just so used to using single message view or whom have unique characteristics to the mail that they receive that Conversation View doesn't address. They simply can't function without having Message View available to them. We are working to bring Message View onto mobile. It is currently in a trusted tester, so I will look. Do you want more people in the trusted tester? You're not answering me. Would you like more people in the trusted tester? Well, I'm asking the PM who's running the trusted tester. And she looks like she's saying yes. So we would be happy to include additional customers in the trusted tester. As I said, this is essentially in trusted tester immediately. It disables conversation queue. It adds reply indicators. Reply indicators will come to desktop as well when this launches. So you'll see significant improvements to message view, both making it available mobile as well as making it better on desktop. Now, one interesting topic that we haven't played up too much is Gmail add-ons. And we launched this actually last year and have been expanding upon it as time went on. Gmail add-ons allows you to complete tasks directly from your inbox. So on mobile, it's available at the bottom of the conversation view. And on desktop, in the new side panel on the right-hand side, add-ons will show up there. And if you've seen a plus button on the right-hand side and wondered, I wonder what that plus button does, it allows you to install add-ons to the product. Now, we have over 45 add-ons produced by our partners today, and the number is growing. Yesterday, at a separate talk, we announced 3 major new partners. We also introduced the addition of compose time add-ons. So traditionally, add-ons were available to offer insights into the content that you are viewing. Add-ons are now available when you're composing a message. And so the 3 new partners were Atlassian, Box, and Dropbox. And the canonical example of using a compose time add-on is if you wanted to link to something from cloud storage. So from Box, Dropbox, similar to the integration that we have with Google Drive today, you could now install the Box or Dropbox add-on. And while you're composing a message, you can click that add-on, see the content that you have in your cloud storage, and then it will insert a link directly into the message, as well as providing access to the recipient. So a very neat way of handling the integration of email and cloud storage. Now, there's a number of interesting features of add-ons that we wanted to highlight for you. One of the most important ones is the fact that you can create add-ons yourself. So every enterprise can create their own add-ons and push it out to their domain for custom purposes that you might have. And there's a number of really great benefits from add-ons. One is that you write it a single time in AppScript, which is, for those of you who aren't developers, very similar to JavaScript. It's a pretty basic but powerful scripting language. The second is that you write it once, and it then runs on both web and mobile. So you can push this out, and it will be available to all of your users who are using Gmail on desktop web, or on Android, or on iOS. And it will be available to all of them. It is easier for you to deploy and control add-ons, whether they're add-ons that you've written for yourself, or whether they are third-party add-ons. Administrators can choose to whitelist add-ons. Administrators can choose to push out add-ons to make it available for all their customers, or all their users, sorry. And finally, add-ons have a number of limited access scopes. So if you think of all the different ways in which a third party can integrate with Gmail, we believe that add-ons is the most secure. So to give you an example, there are a number of legacy apps who integrate with Gmail over IMAP. In order to do so, essentially what they do is you grant them an IMAP scope, which is to essentially read your content. Now, for good or for bad, that essentially means that you grant them access to read all of your content. And you essentially have to trust either by contract or by social contract, by like business contract or by social contract, that they will then only look at or utilize the content that you have granted them access to that is relevant to their particular application. With add-ons, we are adding additional scopes in terms of what the add-ons can see. One of those scopes will be for the add-on to only be able to view the message content which is active on screen when the add-on is active. So that means that if you install an add-on, suppose you install one of the ones that I just showed on the other screen, if it is installed but not active, it cannot have access to the content. It's only when the user explicitly opens it can it see only the content that is relevant in that scope. And so we believe that is a significant security benefit, and one of the reasons why we believe that add-ons are one of the best ways for you to add third-party functionality into Gmail. Now, finally, you may have heard Garrick today announce the general availability of the new Gmail. We issued a blog post as well announcing this and announcing the timelines. And I wanted to quickly run through what those timelines are and what they mean for you. So as of now, the new Gmail is in general availability, and there are 3 options for you as administrators in the admin console. The options are 1, to opt in later, and later means 4 weeks, so August 21. That is, if you did not participate in the EAP, that is the option that is automatically selected for you. There is a second option, which is to allow your users to opt in now. And so both these opt-in options mean you give your users the option to opt in. It does not mean you force them in at this point. If you participate in the EAP, the OUs, the organizational units that participate in EAP, are in that state. They are opted in now, which means users have the ability to opt in. And finally, there is the option to default your users to the new Gmail. If you believe that you want to switch over your domain immediately or on a timeline of your own choosing as opposed to waiting for our timelines to automatically roll out, this is the choice for you. If you are a new customer, I would recommend doing that immediately because there is no reason to have your users see one UI and then switch immediately over to another one. 4 weeks from now, August 21, obviously the opt-in later will now become opt-in now because that time frame has passed. And you will still, of course, retain the ability to default users onto the new experience. In 8 weeks, so 4 weeks after that, everyone will have to default their users in. So that's your time frame in which you have to choose when you want to roll it out or wait for our time frame. And 4 weeks after that will be the final switchover. At that point, we will shut down classic Gmail, and all users will be on the new Gmail.